It started with a simple invitation. No threats, no warning signs, just a quiet Sunday afternoon and a fishing trip that sounded harmless. But by the time the sun went down, two young parents were gone, a toddler was left alone in the middle of nowhere, and a case was set in motion that would haunt Florida for decades. What makes this story even harder to understand isn't just what happened that day, it's why it happened, how one child survived the unthinkable, and why the man responsible spent 25 years waiting for an ending that still leaves people divided. The place itself was already working against them. A massive sod farm stretching for miles, cut through with dirt roads that led nowhere and ponds surrounded by empty land. No nearby homes, no passers-by. If something went wrong out here, help wouldn't come quickly, if it came at all. That Sunday morning felt ordinary. A coworker made a casual call, suggesting a few hours of fishing after work. Nothing unusual, just a way to unwind. The invite sounded friendly, familiar, safe. And that's what made it so effective. The couple had everything going for them. Newly married, proud parents to a baby not even 2 years old. The kind of young family people describe as just getting started. They packed up the truck, brought their child along, even brought the dog. No hesitation, no fear. Why would there be? When they pulled onto the property, the mood didn't change. The sun was out, the air was still, the ponds looked calm. It felt like any other quiet afternoon in rural Florida. A coworker was already there, waiting. To them, he was just another guy from the job, quiet, maybe a little rough, but nothing that raised alarms. What they couldn't see was what had already been decided. The invitation wasn't spontaneous. The isolation wasn't accidental. And nearby, hidden and ready, was something that guaranteed no one would be leaving that farm the way they arrived. And once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. There was no argument, no heated moment, no final warning. 1 second, it was a quiet afternoon. The next, the situation was already out of control. The weapon had been hidden nearby, placed there ahead of time. While the family stood near their truck, relaxed and distracted, he moved without drawing attention. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late to stop. The first shot didn't end it. It crippled, left confusion, pain, and panic where trust had been seconds earlier. Survival instinct kicked in, and one of them tried to get away, stumbling into open ground with no cover and nowhere to hide. Out in that wide, empty field, the distance between hope and reality disappeared. There was no help coming. No one close enough to hear. What followed wasn't quick, and it wasn't accidental. It was personal, violent, and final. Back near the truck, everything had changed. The calm was gone. The sense of safety was gone. And in those terrifying moments, the truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a robbery, and it wasn't random. It was deliberate. And while one life was being taken in that field, another was about to be forced into a decision no one should ever have to make. She knew exactly what was happening. She had seen enough to understand there was no misunderstanding, no chance this would suddenly stop. The danger wasn't passing by, it was closing in. She was hurt, shaken, but still thinking clearly. And in that moment, one thought cut through everything else. Her child was still in the truck. She could have run. The land stretched out endlessly in every direction. But running meant leaving her daughter behind. So instead of fleeing, she turned back. Every step was deliberate. Every second mattered. She went straight to the back seat and secured the straps, making sure they were tight, making sure her baby was safe. It wasn't panic. It was instinct. A mother choosing protection over survival, even knowing what that choice might cost her. That was the last thing she did for her child. Moments later, he reached her. Whatever hope remained ended there. The violence that followed was meant to erase her completely, to silence the only witness left at the scene. But what he didn't erase was the choice she made. And that choice would be the reason her daughter was still alive when the sun came up. When it was over, the farm fell silent again. No shouting, no movement, just open land and two bodies left where they fell. And in the back seat of the truck, a toddler sat strapped into a car seat, exactly where her mother had placed her. He had a choice. He could have erased the last living connection to what had happened. Instead, he walked away. He left the doors open, the engine off, and drove out of the property as if nothing behind him mattered. Night came fast. The temperature dropped. The farm grew darker and louder in its own way. Insects emerged from the nearby water. Time stretched on without anyone coming. The child was too young to understand what had happened. Too young to escape. Too young to help herself. She cried, then grew quiet, then waited. Hour after hour passed in that seat with no food, no water, and no comfort. 18 hours went by. By the time morning light crept across the fields, the truck still sat where it had been left. The doors were still open. And against every expectation, the child was still alive. But not for much longer, unless someone found her soon. Monday morning began like any other workday. Trucks rolled in. Equipment started up. But almost immediately, something felt off. One employee hadn't shown up, someone who never missed a shift. Calls went unanswered. Concern turned into unease. The last thing anyone remembered was talk of fishing on the property the day before. That was enough to send a few workers out across the land to look. Hours later, near one of the reservoirs, they saw it. A pickup truck sitting alone, doors wide open. That alone was strange. As they got closer, the scene came into focus, and nothing could prepare them for what they were about to find. In the open field nearby, a body lay face up. The damage was so severe it barely looked human. Shock barely had time to settle before they noticed a second body near the truck. Then they heard something, a faint sound from inside the vehicle. One of the workers stepped closer and looked into the back seat. There, strapped into a car seat, was a toddler, alive, covered in dried blood and insect bites. Everything stopped. Within minutes, the farm was flooded with flashing lights and sirens. Investigators locked down the area. Medics rushed the child away. What had started as a missing coworker had turned into a crime so brutal it stunned everyone who saw it. And almost immediately, one question rose above all others. Who had been with them last? The answer came quicker than anyone wanted. There was only one person who had been with the family that afternoon. The coworker who made the call. The man who suggested the fishing trip. At first glance, he didn't fit the image people expect in a case like this. He wasn't loud or aggressive. He blended in, quiet, kept to himself. Just another laborer working long days in the Florida heat. No serious criminal past. No reputation for violence. When investigators brought him in, he stayed calm. Too calm. He talked easily, answered questions, and denied everything. Said he had gone off on his own. Claimed he never saw what happened. On the surface, it almost sounded believable. But the story didn't hold. Witnesses placed him with the family just before they disappeared. Later that day, people noticed something else. Blood on his clothes, scratches on his body. A distracted look that didn't match his explanation. Then the evidence started stacking up. A rifle, ditched when his truck ran out of gas. Parts at the scene that matched it exactly. A knife linked to one victim. DNA where it shouldn't have been. Proof that turned denial into fiction. There was no mystery anymore. No alternative suspect. The man who made the friendly invite wasn't just involved. He was responsible. And as the case moved forward, another question began to surface. How someone like him ended up capable of something this extreme. The verdict came quickly. The punishment did not. He was sentenced to die, but death didn't come soon. Years turned into decades inside a small concrete cell, measured in appeals, denials, and dates that came and went. Outside those walls, the victims' families aged, grieved, and waited. The case never fully settled. Questions about his mental capacity followed him through the courts. Experts argued over how much he truly understood. Lawyers pointed to his childhood, his development, his drinking. Supporters said he shouldn't be put to death. Others said mercy had ended long ago. Then came a twist that changed everything, a legal ruling that gave many death row inmates a second chance. But timing mattered. His case had closed just days too early. Missed by less than a month. If the calendar had moved slower, his sentence might have been reconsidered. Instead, the door stayed shut. Year after year passed. Appeals failed. Hope faded. And finally, a date was set. 25 years after that Sunday afternoon, the waiting was over. But when the end finally arrived, not everyone felt relief. When it was finally over, there was no celebration, just exhaustion. For some, the execution felt like long-delayed justice. For others, it reopened wounds that never truly healed. The child who survived that day was no longer a child. She had grown up carrying a story she couldn't remember, shaped by parents she never got to know. Photographs and second-hand memories became all she had. The life that should have been was something she could only imagine. For the families, the sentence brought a kind of closure, but not peace. Nothing could undo what happened on that farm. No ruling, no punishment, no final moment could give back what was taken. And for everyone else, the case leaves an uncomfortable question behind. After all this time, after all the waiting, was justice finally served? Or was it simply the end of a tragedy that never really had a resolution at all? Because some stories don't end cleanly. They just stop.